All the parts on the chair horse are S4S now, and I'm going to start working on the joinery. So first up are the legs and feet. So I've cut these to length. I cut one end nice and square and then measured over on my chop saw, cut the other end on each of these. On the legs, I lightly sanded the edges because next up, I'm going to be cutting a dado in here to fit nicely over the legs, and I want them to be the final width. So what I'm going to do here is center the leg on here, which puts it about 5 inches, I think. Yeah, 5 inches from either side. I'm going to put a couple of marks here. And I'm going to cut a 1/4 inch deep here to fit onto the leg. I've got the dado set up for a 1/4 inch deep cut. And I'm going to be, like I said, evacuating that material there. I need a stop, which I'll put here. And I want a backer so that when the dado set comes out the back side, I don't get tear out back there. So just a 1/4 inch MDF plywood. And I want, of course, a stop. Now, I was starting to set up the stop like that, but then I can't move the piece over. So I'm going to set this up so that the stop limits me at this end. So I'm about a 1/16 short of my line there, and I'll move the stop a little bit of time to sneak up on it. But right now, yeah, about a 1/16 short. So I'll clamp this in place, clamp that in place. So I'm good to go. All right, as I expected, when I take a look at this, I'm about 1/8 of an inch too narrow right now. So 1/16 on each side. So I need to move the stop away from the workpiece here. And the way I do that, to make sure I can see what I'm doing, I've got the stop up against here. This isn't going to move just due to the weight of it. And if I'm concerned it's going to move, I'll actually clamp it in place or put something on it. But in this case, I should be fine. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to loosen this and then back this off, because I can see really accurately, how far I've moved that. We're pretty good at determining small distances. So I'm going to start there. I think that looks good. I don't want to overdo it. So I'll go ahead and keep tweaking that until I get a nice fit on the parts. Okay, I'm happy with that fit. That looks good. So that was just on the first one. So now I've got the stop set. I'll go ahead and cut the other one. Okay, all set. Now, notice I've got a really clean line there. That's thanks to a relatively sharp blade and using the backer. I have sometimes, and when I was teaching this at school, sometimes we'd get tear out here. So when you put these together, you saw some gaps there that bothered some people. So if that happens, what I've done is then I go to the router table and just take, whatever, a 32nd or maybe even a 64th off of here, being very careful not to, mess up your edges here. Just to clean that up. In this case, this looks really good. I'm very happy with that. Now, also, I should point out, these were apparently slightly different in size. So this fits better on this one and the other one fits better on the other one. So I'm going to mark those to make sure I put it back in the same spot. And on the other one, there was a little spot that I missed. Didn't quite clean up, so I'll cover that up with the foot there. So next up, I'm going to create the little feet on the feet. You know, we don't want this whole surface sitting on the floor. It would probably rock on a little high spot. So I'm going to cut out some material in between here. So I've got a 3/4 inch straight bit in my router table. It's a little taller than this is thick. If it was a shorter bit, I'd do it, you know, by raising the bit in steps. So what I want to do is cut out, you know, a 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch here. So maybe about half the diameter. So that looks good. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to start up against a stop here and then move part way over half the, you know, halfway, and then flip it over and do it again starting from the stop. That'll get me, you know, consistent size feet here. Also, I did mark on here which side's up, so I want to make sure I've got that, of course, away from the fence. So I'm going to come over. It doesn't matter too much, maybe 3 or so inches. You know, like a lot of these things, I just want it to be consistent, not necessarily a particular dimension. So there's my stop. I'll start there, go a little past halfway, and then flip it. Oops. So it turns out I was going against the grain there. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn it around and go back the first direction. And here now I'm going with the grain. So I'm going to go as far as I can, and then I'll turn it over and finish it up. Well, that got my attention. So took off a little more than I could chew there. So I'm good now. The stop moved a teeny bit, so I just cut the other one, and all is good. There's a little tear out there, but that's on the inside. You won't see it. So I think we're good to go. So I think the lesson there is you know, on that first cut, I knew I'd taken off a little too much. I tried to sneak up on the second one. That still didn't work. So I should have started with the fence a little further forward and then move back a little bit at a time just to minimize the depth of cut. Next up, I'm going to cut the angles at the top of the feet. So I've got my material here. Now, don't be tempted to, you know, cut off, you know, whatever, something like that, because, and don't ask me how I know that, this piece, this is the bottom stretcher, sits here. So I want to make sure I'm past that. So this is 1 1/8 thick. So I want to come out a little further than that, 1 1/4, 1 3/8. So I'll come out 1 3/8. And then I like to come up about 2 1/2 from the bottom. So actually I'm going to set my combination square for that. There. And then there. And I want to come up to my mark. So I'm going to set my T-bevel for that angle. So I'll set that, and then using the 2 1/2 inch mark on each side. So I'll mark the other one, go cut that on the bandsaw, and then I think I'm gonna, maybe just hand plane those flat. Okay, I almost messed up there. When I knocked my combination square on the floor, it changed the setting. So this side is different than this side. So I've reset it correctly, and now I'll continue. All right, I want to make sure I erase the old line. Next, I need to drill the holes in the legs. So they're 4 inches down and 10 inches down from the top. So I've got the bottoms marked. I'm going to mark 4 inches and 10 inches. And now I need to find center. Now these are 6 inches wide, so if I set this to 3 less the pencil width, I'm going to just try this and see from both sides. So I'm a little bit too long. Bring that back just a touch. And then on the other side, bring that across. Don't think that's quite far enough. Okay, so 3/8 holes. Okay, I've drilled the holes in the legs. I used the fence on my drill press and a brad point bit to do that. Fence, of course, kept everything consistent. Next, I need to attach the feet to the bottom of the legs here. So I'm going to lay out the holes on this side, since it's obvious where the leg's going. I'm going to come in 3/4 from each edge, so 4 holes for number 8 screws. I'll drill from this side, and then I'll countersink from the other side. So I've got the countersink bit in now, and I've set the depth. So I've set the depth stop. I like to do that when I'm drilling multiple holes. It just makes it easier once I've got the depth set. So I'll go ahead and finish up drilling these. I've got the parts sanded now, and one thing I did not do is I did not sand this corner, and I did not round these corners because things are going to go up against there. The bottom stretcher comes here. I want that flat and don't have a gap there. And then similarly on this piece, some things cover these corners, some don't. So all the big surfaces are sanded, and most of the corners are rounded. So to install this, I'm going to put this where it belongs, and I want to mark where my pilot holes are going to go. So I don't like to just put the pilot hole bit in here and start drilling, because it might be off center. I mean, likely it's not in the center of that hole, and if I put it too far off, then when I put the screw in, it's going to slide this way or that. So what I like to do, I'm going to take the same size bit that I drilled the clearance hole with. I've got this aligned here flush on the bottom edge there, and I'm just going to dimple, just slightly drill into that. And what's going to happen is, because that's at an angle, when I put this bit in, it's going to find the center of the hole. Also, this sticks out a little bit less than the length of this screw. So that also gets my pilot hole the right depth. So I'll do that for the rest of these. I'm going to throw a little bit of glue on here, and then I'll screw these all together. Installing the bottom stretchers is next. So those are the parts that attach the two leg assemblies together. I've sanded these, all the faces and the outer edges, because on the inner edges, I don't want to round over here. I'll round those inner edges after this is together. And you can see why here too. This is why I did not round that, because I want that to be nice and flush there. The screws for this, now I should have drilled these to attach these at the same time, but I wasn't thinking ahead. On these bottom ones, they're up a little higher since it doesn't span this whole distance. So I came up 3/4 from this surface to here and then 3/4 down from there. Also note that I'm using long screws here because I'm going into end grain. End grain isn't nearly as strong as going into face grain. So I'm using 3-inch screws here, and that's always worked fine in the past. So these two are held together here, and then the top stretcher goes here. So there's quite a bit of strength up here, but yeah, just to make sure nothing comes loose, I'm using long screws here. I've got this clamp together now, and a couple of things I want to point out. When I cut these to length, I double checked to make sure my chop saw was cutting square. That's how I cut them. Because, as you can see now, when this is together, if these aren't square cuts, then you're going to get this out of parallel. And then, when you try and put your top part in here that slides up and down, it's not going to work well at all. These really need to be parallel. So really make sure your whatever you're using to cut these is square. I'm set up here. I've got some clamps holding this all together. I had to use these clamps to hold these up because they don't stand by themselves. They tend to fall over. So these hand screw clamps are there just to keep that stable. I can take them off now that these clamps are on. So I'm going to go through the same process as before. I will, dimple these and use pilot holes. Now, I don't have a long enough bit to drill a pilot hole that distance. So once I've dimpled these and drilled a little bit of the ways in, I'm going to take this apart and drill, basically as far as I can. The other thing I should point out, and I should have mentioned this before, I have seen people break screws when putting this stuff together. So sometimes what I'll do, if the screw is starting to feel a little tight, or if it really starts to squeak, put some beeswax on the threads of the screw, and that almost always helps get things together without breaking anything. So should be good to go here. I'll start the process. Before I put this together, I'm going to put one of the screws in here, just unassembled, just to make sure that the pilot hole is big enough and to get a sense of how this is going to work. Okay, that seems pretty good. Yeah, that went okay. I might still put a little bit of beeswax on, but yeah, I think the pilot hole should be fine. And just for reference, that is 7/64 for a 3-inch drywall screw. I've got some beeswax here. I just kind of rub that on there. Now I'm not going to clamp it back together. Yeah, that looks good. Make sure that's flush. So I think a dead blow hammer works really well for kind of tapping things into place. There we go. So I'll go ahead and put the rest of these in. Okay. So far so good. And now I'm curious here if I measure, see how square things are. So that's 22.5. And that is well, I mean, I can just use my finger to get it to 22.5. It's within, less than 64. So things are nice and square. Next, we'll put the top stretchers on. To get the length of the top stretcher, I'm going to use the physical part. I'm not going to do any measuring. So I've clamped just a piece of scrap against the legs, and I've checked the dimension top and bottom, and I had to tap a little bit to get it into place so they're both equal. So, like I said before, I'm just 22.5, just a touch under 22.5 top and bottom. So I know these are parallel. I've taken a couple of my quick clamps here and set them down the distance or the width of this part. And I've already cut one end of this nice and square. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to set that just there on the clamp. I'm going to make sure it's flush at this end. And then I'm going to take my marking knife and put a little knife line right at the length. So now I'm going to go to my chop saw, and I've got a zero clearance backer on my chop saw, so I know right where the saw is going to cut. So I'll just line that knife line up with the edge of my backer board, and I should get a cut that's right on that spot. So I'll do that for the other side, and then just like the other parts, I'll drill some clearance and countersink holes and pilot holes, of course, and then I'll go ahead and attach these onto here. First thing I'll do, though, is I will sand 4 faces and the 2 outside corners. Okay, so all of the base is done now. I just need to do a little more sanding so I can sand the inside of these here, the outside here. I do not want to sand this corner yet because we're going to put the guides there. So I pretty much everything except these. One last thing, as I'm rounding corners and things, I'm realizing there are a couple other edges you do not want to round. This one here, because that there's going to be a piece sliding up and down here, so we want to kind of scrape off any whatever that gets on this piece. So keep that one square. Anyway, other than that, should be good to go.